Will the Carolina Panthers follow a similar rebuild path as the Houston Texans and Detroit Lions? I'll answer that question among other listener questions in this week's edition of the Weekly Friday Mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays, like today, all throughout the offseason, I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions either at me or DM me to get your weekly Friday mailbag questions in for next week's edition of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are wrapping up the month of May today, which means starting next week, we're officially in off-season mode. So 3 shows for 6 straight weeks. I know a lot of you, for whatever reason, like to complain about this free podcast being too frequent, which is super odd considering that ESPN, Fox, NBC, CBS, every sports outlet doesn't care about your team. But Locked On, we're here every day for you. But we'll be here for you only 3. I guess I'll technically be here for you for only 3 days a week starting next week. So subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I'm not going to necessarily always have it be a Monday, Wednesday, Friday situation. Just kind of depends on what I got going on, because this is my time of the year to try to get away from this team and thinking about the Panthers as things slow down, as there's still OTAs going on, mandatory minicamp, but then there will be that hiatus where there's nothing going on. So things start to slow down in the NFL. So we're going to be in off-season mode starting next week. So still get your questions in, still listen to the show, but make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll get into the whole roster breakdown, position breakdowns, as we've done the last couple of years. So stay tuned for that. Likely coming at the middle of next month in June. Let's go ahead and get into the weekly Friday mailbag. Kendrick, he asked a question, and he's got an interesting question about the Panthers rebuild here and what path they may follow, looking at a couple of other teams that were dormant and now have risen to the top of their respective divisions potentially. He says, as a supporter of a perennial non-contender, yet again, it seems that we have eternal hope for the new season. We've had a few upgrades in talent on the roster, but nothing over the top. This year, are we collectively placing our faith in an upgrade of the front office / coaching staff to better manage the talent on the field? Is this the beginning of following similar paths as the Texans or Lions, where new coaching staffs completely altered the trajectory of the organization? Yeah, hope springs eternal in the NFL every spring, it feels like, because you have the draft, you have free agency, and you've been able to get away from the previous season and feel like, all right, things weren't great. You look at Frank Reich, what he did, and you look at all the missteps. This coaching staff, this front office, surely they're going to do everything right this time around. That happens here in Carolina, basically on an annual basis, considering that we have a different head coach every damn offseason at this point. But also, it happens across the league, where I look at the NFL, there's no other sport in this country where you can really feel like you have a chance, professional sports-wise, no matter what your market size is, to compete for a title. The NBA, not like that. You can look at the Mavs and the Celtics both being in the NBA Finals. Have you ever been to Dallas? Massive. We already know Boston, big ass city too. So big markets playing there in the NBA. MLB can be a little bit weirder, but still is not every team's not going to have a chance in the financials of it. Not having a salary cap. The haves, the have-nots, it's going to always exist. And in hockey, I have no idea. So I'm not even going to sit here and talk about that. But still, the NFL does a great job of having every fan base believe that they can turn it around. NFL, not for long, meaning you're not going to be bad for long. You're not going to win for long. You're not going to play for long. So things can turn around in one off season. It's interesting that you bring up the Texans and the Lions. Like Detroit, They brought in Brad Holmes over from LA. They hired Dan Campbell. No one was taking him seriously when he's talking about biting kneecaps off. And he had been in the interim for when Joe Philbin was fired down in Miami with the Dolphins. This wasn't some hotshot coaching candidate that a lot of people wanted. Similar, Dave Canales was not necessarily a hotshot coaching candidate that everyone wanted. Now, he didn't come out here to Carolina and talk about biting kneecaps and all of that, but he did bring a different kind of energy than it was here before, with Frank Reich being more, I guess, subdued and just not somebody who's a rah-rah kind of guy. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have that fire and that passion. It just wasn't what he displayed as a leader here in Carolina. So that's interesting, the similarities there as far as the head coaches and where teams wanted him. But they also traded for Jared Goff, who had already played in a Super Bowl and had plenty of playoff experience and shown that he was a capable quarterback in the NFL. He just wasn't necessarily what the Rams and Sean McVay wanted, and they were right to do that as they brought in Matthew Stafford, won a Super Bowl. And as we see with Detroit, they got it right there too. Everyone thought that the Lions were going to bring in Goff for a year, bring in somebody else, and we just saw Jared Goff get paid this offseason. He helped the Lions get the NFC title game, and they really should have gone to the Super Bowl. A great story for a guy born and raised in California, goes to Cal, plays for the Rams, gets exiled to almost Canada, and is now a guy beloved in Detroit, Michigan, a town that has watched a bunch of bad football for like my entire lifetime. And thank God they're starting to no longer waste our time on Thanksgiving. The Texans 1-2 is interesting to me, where last year you look at what Houston did. That's everything Carolina could have had. The Panthers could have had D'Amico Ryans if David Tepper wasn't very obvious in his idea that he only wanted an offensive coach, and D'Amico Ryans didn't want to come here just to be a Rooney Rule kind of checkbox. So he decided, I'm not going to interview here because the owner clearly doesn't want to talk to me. He doesn't actually want to hire me. And if he was going to hire a defensive coach, would have hired Steve Wilkes. But D'Amico Ryans would have made a lot of sense too, considering what he was able to do in San Francisco and the success that some of those Shanahan assistants have had recently as head coaches. He goes down to Houston. They draft C.J. Stroud. The Panthers could have had C.J. Stroud. They decided they wanted Bryce Young. And you look at some of the free agency moves that they made. The Panthers went out and got Hayden Hurst. The Texans got Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz was fantastic, just missed hitting that bonus in his contract last year. He's back in Houston. Hayden Hurst is now a L.A. Charger. Frank Reich is no longer here. There's still a lot of questions about Bryce Young. They brought in a new head coach to try and help Bryce Young and turn around this offense. The Texans also, they drafted Tank Dell. The Panthers drafted Jonathan Mingo. Tank Dell's going into the season as a key piece of that offense. Jonathan Mingo, we're not sure what his role is. When you look at Houston, Carolina, and two ownership groups where I don't think a lot of people feel very highly about Cal McNair. And certainly we will see what David Tepper does here in Carolina. And looks like Cal McNair got everything right by simply just taking a head coach who has a history with the organization, where David Tepper, he's gotten everything wrong so far. So the hope is that Tepper got it right this time around, that the Panthers make all the right decisions. That is an organization where you could have had what they had, but that you decided that you didn't want it, and look at you now. Not to say that the Panthers now can't turn things around, not to say that they got the quarterback wrong, because they could have gotten it right. Just everything around him, last year was wrong. So we'll see how it works out. But it is interesting that you bring up the Texans and the Lions. I don't think there's an apples-to-apples comparison with those two teams, but you can look at the diverging paths Panthers and Texans took last year and wonder if the Panthers hired D'Amico, brought in CJ, drafted Tank, got Dalton, where are they now compared to where they are and were a season ago? So good question there from Kendrick. One from Cornelius here asking, what are your thoughts on Dave Canales as a head coach so far? Going off what players say about him and his press conferences, I am impressed. He seems more confident and open compared to the last two full-time hires we've had. I would disagree there. Matt Rule, certainly early on, you guys were eating it up. He's been honest in his press conferences and hasn't been afraid to admit that it's still a learning process for him. Now, Matt Rule necessarily was not honest. He has given out some really good insight about his process. Now he envisions the offense to be. It may seem like he is divulging too much information, but it's so early. A lot of that will change by the time the season comes. Hearing him talk about that vision, though, makes me feel a bit more confident in this team. I do appreciate, just from the media perspective of it, that Dave Canales is willing to answer questions. Frank Reich didn't really want to go into too much detail. Understand there's the boogeyman's out there going to take my place, which is kind of crazy. Everyone runs basically the same offense nowadays in the NFL. You just got to have the Jimmies and Joes, which Panthers did not have last year. I do appreciate, like, when a simple question, we talked about this with Alex Zeitlo, the Observer, yesterday, a simple question about Jalen Coker gets asked. He goes into great detail on what they liked about him. And then Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl picks that up and he puts it on Twitter. To say, oh my God, you never see a coach do all of that. And yeah, it's different. It's cool. It's refreshing to just be honest, to be transparent about things and not to sit here and kind of run away from questions. Now, he has not answered anything about Eddie Pinheiro. Doesn't need that. Doesn't have to. It's a voluntary portion of the offseason, so Pinheiro doesn't have to be here. Now, if he's not here in 2 weeks' time, then yeah, I think you're going to need to answer that question, Dave. But am I impressed by him? Am I confident in him and all that? No. Go out and win games. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm so past the winning the press conference. I don't care. I do not care what he says as far as his confidence and all that. I don't care what he says in May. I don't care what he says in April. I don't care what he says in June. I don't care what he says in July. I don't care what he says in August. What are you going to do in September, October, November, December, and January, and hopefully February? That's what I care about. The wins and losses. People just get way too caught up in these press conferences and all the good vibes. Y'all got caught up in it last year when they sold you the blueprint and all that bull, and they went 2-15. You got caught up in it with Matt Rule. Hope. That's what the NFL sells, and y'all eat it up. And they went there and played that trailer about Dan Morgan right into work, being like, we got to build a team that the city can be proud of, yada, yada. I don't give a damn what Dan Morgan has to say about that. Did you bring in the right players? Because we're going to find out pretty damn soon, Dan, whether you did. We're going to have to find out over this year and next offseason, next season, find out whether it was the right decision to actually put you down the hallway in the GM chair. None of that matters to me. None of it. Not a single bit of it. It is nice to hear about that OTAs offensively. They're going through just 9 days of installs. Nice to know that there's something not to really care about. And that's really what they're doing. That's nice insight. But as far as what Ian Thomas looks like, what Icky looks like, what any of these guys look like in May, no, don't care. So Dave Canales, am I impressed by him? Not really. Good vibes all around. That's cool. But what's impressive? That he a good public speaker? Cool. All right. But can he coach? Can he win games? That's what I care about. Don't care about his presence at press conferences. Don't care what he says. What are you going to do? The last two guys didn't do anything but lose. Is he going to win? If he wins, then I'll be impressed. He can say whatever the hell he wants. Just win football games. That's what I'm concerned about. So if you're impressed, by all means. But for me, well past any of that mattering at all. All right, let's take a quick pause, and we'll come back and answer more of your weekly Friday mailbag questions here on Locked On Panthers. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. And getting back to that last question, I'm not trying to be harsh and to tell you not to be excited, because certainly have hope, believe in your team. Like, if you don't have excitement, if you don't believe in this team, then, well, like, what's the point of it all? Like, you got dare to dream. Totally get that. My thing is, I see it all the time. People just invest themselves into things that really just don't matter, and they get too caught up, and at the end of the day, they're disappointed. Like, I feel like as a Panther fan, yes, be excited. Got a new head coach, new possibilities, what he's done with Baker, what he's done with Geno, all that is something to be excited about. What he says at a press conference, no. Like, the resume, yes. But like the thoughts out there he's putting out on press conferences, not really, man. Like, we all should be, and you feel however you want to feel, of course. I'm not going to tell you how to feel. I'm just thinking that it logically, to me, Panther fans should be probably thinking that, well, we haven't been to the playoffs since 2017. And Rule was a dud. Reich was a dud. Like, I want to see it first. That's where I'm at. I want to see it first. I would just think that you guys want to see it first instead of throwing yourselves in these high expectations then being disappointed yet again, because that's an annual tradition here in Carolina. And I guess it's an annual tradition across the NFL as fans talk themselves into something that's not going to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, they're pissed, even though it was their unrealistic expectations in the first place that led them there to that disappointment. And of course, their team disappointed them as well. So just be excited about Dave, but can he win some games first before I have to be impressed by him? All right, over to Alex. Given previous comments about wanting a veteran third-string quarterback, those are comments from Dave Canales, by the way, it seems like that player is not on the roster. Who are some free agents that you would like to see fill that role? Are there any veteran free agents in other positions that you want the Panthers to target outside of Stephon Gilmore? So I guess we're really talking about third-string quarterback and corner. I looked over at overthecap.com and looked at the free agents and tried to see which quarterbacks or veterans are available. And like the best one I saw was Ryan Tannehill. And I don't know what his deal is after Tennessee moved on from him this offseason. They moved on from Derrick Henry as well as they're changing things over, got rid of Kevin Byard in the middle of last season as they traded him to Philadelphia. And yeah, A.J. Brown, like that's an organization that has spent a lot of money to bring in new players, but also an organization that has gotten rid of a lot of those guys that helped them get to that AFC title game and had the number one seed a couple years ago in the AFC. So Tannehill, somebody that would make sense to me. I don't think other than the wide receiver coach here in Carolina, he has much of a connection with the staff. So I don't know. It's the thing too. Like you never want to see the third quarterback play. If Bryce gets hurt, you see Andy, you never want to see the third quarterback. We never want to see Jack Plummer on the field. And we're never going to want to see Ryan Tannehill on the field. But the thing is, if you're going to have a third quarterback, you probably would rather have a guy who has started a playoff game, who has been to the AFC title game, and that would be Ryan Tannehill. So I would be interested in that. It's not going to be one of those things where I'm like, yeah, Ryan Tannehill's in Carolina, because I hope he never plays. I want to see Bryce play. And if Bryce goes down, Andy Dalton. And then if Andy Dalton goes down, feel better about Ryan Tannehill playing than like Jack Plummer, but still don't feel great about it because, well, you'd be down to your third quarterback. As far as the cornerbacks go, Xavier Howard, he's kind of the big name other than Stephon Gilmore that's still available after the Dolphins got rid of him. Looking at where we are in the calendar as OTA is about to wrap up next week, then mandatory minicamp, seems like a guy who's not going to sign until we get to July. And then we get to right before training camp. So we're going to have to wait. And that just feels like that's going to be the case with any sort of veterans. They could sign somebody. They could sign somebody because I remember a couple years ago, the whole Baker Mayfield thing, the Panthers were talking about that their artificial deadline was to have them in there by mandatory minicamp, which didn't happen. And also was bull. They waited like 3 weeks later to get that deal done, which was ridiculous. So maybe they want to do that again. I don't know, but Xavier Howard, somebody I'm looking at. Adoree Jackson, he's a veteran who's been in Tennessee and in New York. J.C. Jackson, who's at the Pats last year. There's been reports that he might go back. It seems like he's just waiting, not want to be taking part in any voluntary stuff, even though it's voluntary. Jamal Agnew and Trey Herndon are two guys from Jacksonville that would have ties. You would think to Todd Wash at some point in time in their career. Those are the guys I'm looking at. I don't know which one the Panthers would prefer. I know Stephon Gilmore is who the fan base would like to have, but those are 5 other names that I'm looking at as veterans that are available, that have played a lot of snaps, that may be able to come in here and help out and provide some depth at the outside corner spot. I just think that is something that's not going to be solved until the end of July. So, folks, please enjoy the next month and a half in peace and then really wonder what exactly they're going to do at the position group once we get to closer to training camp at the end of July. All right, Joe, he's got a question about returning kicks and also a player. I just thought we were not going to ever bring this guy's name up again, but the obsession continues. He asked, seeing the news on Tariq Cohen being signed by the Jets, it sparked curiosity in me about the Panthers' plans for a return specialist with the new rules and talking heads saying return specialists would now touch the ball 100 plus times. Yeah, Tariq Cohen, it's unfortunate it didn't work out for him. I don't even know if you can say it didn't work out for him in Carolina. He got an opportunity back in the NFL again after having an awful injury to his knee back in Atlanta in 2020 and then tearing his Achilles while working out on, Instagram Live. It sucks that it happened to him, a guy who's from this state. I'm going to root for anybody from this state to have success because North Carolinian first and foremost, man. But Yeah, I just don't know at this point in time in his career with the injuries and the fact he hasn't played football in a regular season game in almost 4 years, if he's going to get another opportunity to really be a difference maker. And I just wonder for Carolina, if they felt like Tariq Cohen could help them as a kick specialist, wouldn't he still be on the roster here? Like, I don't know what the Jets' plans are. They had that one guy who returned that kick last year against the Bills to win that game on Monday Night Football, even though there's a massive block in the back by Chaz Surratt. But either way, screw Buffalo. I just I wouldn't make too much of like Cohen going to New York. If it works out for him, he's a returner. Awesome, great comeback story for him. I wouldn't make too much of that. They're just adding another guy and everything that Robert Saleh is talking about, his explosiveness, like that happened like in 2018 and 2019. Like that's a long time ago, y'all. A long time ago. Looking at Carolina, I would expect guys like Raheem Blackshear, who returned kicks last year, Xavier Leggett to get opportunities, even maybe Amir Smith-Marset. Like those feel like the three guys here who are probably going to be in that spot to return kicks. And I still feel like if Cohen was something they felt like could help them, he would still be in Carolina. But maybe they got it wrong. Only time will tell. I saw that. It was like, good for him. And that's basically my only thoughts. I don't think it's going to really yield much, but we'll see. Hopefully it does. All right. Let's take another quick pause. We'll come back and answer the rest of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. All right, couple more questions here. Got one from Mike, which is a question I'm very surprised to get because I feel like we've already kind of covered this, but I guess we'll cover it again. Mike asking, I'm curious, get your take on why the Panthers selected Jonathan Brooks instead of shoring up the offensive line, in particular, a center. This is going to be a down year for sure. He might get to 100% by the end of the season, and I know you hate second contracts and running backs, so why blow one of his years knowing he isn't going to contribute? He is not that generational talent, and he is already hurt. Why not draft a center and then focus on the running backs next draft? Well, all the reports as soon as he was drafted came out and said he'd be available and clear by July 1. Training camp, the rookies are going to have to report by the 19th. The veterans will be there on the 23rd. I think the first day of practice will be on the 24th. That's news, by the way. The Panthers have not announced that. So there you go for folks wondering when training camp starts. Yeah, like I expect him. It's going to take a little bit of time to like get the trust back in that knee and to get speed in the NFL because he hasn't been out there for these practices during the offseason, and that is something that's going to slow him down. But I really do feel like by the second half of the season, he's going to be a pretty big contributor, if not even earlier than that. The Panthers brought him in because they talked about versatility, that he's versatile. They need versatility at the running back position. And that's not what they have. Miles Sanders is not that. Chuba Hubbard is not that. The rest of the guys not that. So they want to get somebody who they feel like fits their offense better, and they value the running back position. So that's why they took him. As far as center goes, there's a great argument that you don't need to have a young center be with Bryce Young, who's only a second-year player. He needs a veteran with him, and he's got that now in Austin Corbett, who he's worked with barely, but he's worked with in the past. So there's that. I understand. I mean, this is something that we talked about like literally over a month ago, and I've so moved on from all of that. I would encourage you to go back and listen to the draft shows, the one I did, especially about Jonathan Brooks being drafted after night 2 of the draft. But as far as this whole predicament and dilemma, something that I haven't really thought of for over a month now because we've kind of moved on. But they got him because he's somebody who is versatile, fits what they want to do offensively. And apparently, I mean, they have better insight of their medicals and they have a plan for him. And Brooks talked about that plan, which made him very comfortable to come to Carolina, I think, when healthy, which will be this year. I don't think he's going to not be able to contribute this season. Yeah, he'll be probably their top running back. And as far as not being a generational talent, who the hell knows? He's a top running back on the board. It's not like they went out there and got the 5th running back on the board in the second round. Like that then would not make any sense. But this makes sense for them. This makes sense to me, not necessarily. But that's their logic based off of how I'm reading the situation. Final question coming from Rod. He asked me, what are your predictions for the 2024 team captains? Using last year's selection criteria, captains will be the quarterback. So Bryce Young, 2 offensive players, 2 defensive players, and a special teams player. All right. Interesting question here. Yeah, Bryce Young, quarterback, always has to be the captain, even if the quarterback's no good. And I'm not saying that Bryce is no good. I just think about like Zach Wilson. Like, come on. So Bryce will be the captain. 2 other offensive players. Got to think Moten is a captain. May not be the most vocal guy, but I do think Moten is a leader, obviously, in this locker room. So I would take him. And then I'll take Adam Thielen as being another veteran. I think those would be the two guys I think would be the other offensive captains in Carolina. Defensive players, obviously Derek Brown is going to be a captain, and I think Shaq Thompson. Like, I think those would be the two guys that are going to be the clear captains. They've been around, especially Shaq, leaders in that locker room. I think those are the two guys. And like, you would love to see JC. I just think, well, JC's barely out there. So not meaning he can't be a captain if he's always injured, but still. And a special teams player, why not Sam Franklin Jr.? Kind of being your special teams ace the last couple of years. I think he could be a special teams captain. So those are just my guesses. We'll see how it works out. I don't know how Dave Canales and the staff are going to go about selecting captains, whether it's players vote, they choose them. But that's just my read on the situation potentially here in Carolina. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where, again, on Friday next week, I'll be back to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions. Another reminder for you all, starting next week, we are in off-season mode, thank God. I didn't ask to do 5 days a week. I did not ask to do 5 days a week throughout the offseason. So believe me, I'm happy about it. So 3 days a week. Going to try to mainly do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where Monday shows, I'm going to record them on Monday. You'll get them on Monday. Wednesday, I'm going to record them on Wednesday. You're going to get them on Wednesday. Then Friday, plan is to have those ready for you like Friday morning. If not, by like noon on Friday. It's kind of how we've been doing it the last couple of weeks here on the show. So that is likely the schedule. And it's all subject to change based off of what's going on with Panthers and with the calendar, holidays, and all that. So just stay tuned. But that's all that's coming up for you for the next only 6 weeks. Wish it was like 2 full months, but only 6 weeks. All right. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Monday, maybe next week sometime. Either way, enjoy your weekend.